And throw it back over to Melodi and to Buffy to continue us with our UC NAGPRA panel.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take over and give Melodi a little bit of break. She was on overload the first half. So for this, we're going to actually finish our first session and then move into the Native American Heritage Commission piece of it. So we're going to cut straight to the UC coordinators. And who wants to begin? Are we going to start, I think, with, what did we decide? Was it Wendy or Wendy?
We're done. It was going to be Megan or
Okay, let's start with Megan.
Sorry, you just cut out there. Starting with me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you hear me? I can't hear anyone.
I can hear you.
I just lost all audio. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry about that. So thank you for that, Buffy. And I do want to start with a little bit of just acknowledgement and acknowledge, I think Lourdes started this, but acknowledging why we are here, and because these ancestors were taken without the free, prior, and informed consent of their descendant communities. And I think that's really important to center on. And I also want to acknowledge what Carol had mentioned too, just acknowledge the negative reputation and the negative, the challenges and the barriers that the UC Davis campus has had for 30 years of compliance with NAGPRA. So we are working to resolve those issues. We're working to repair those relationships and restart. It's not overnight, but we are trying to make progress in all of those areas. I've had the opportunity to consult with many of you on the today's call, but not everyone. So I thought it would be good to start with a little background. So UC Davis, we are one of the more recent campuses. And so the ancestors and materials that are stored here tend to be generally collected between 1960 and 1980s. They were primarily part of excavations in anticipation of either development projects or university-sponsored field schools. We also have situations where there's coroner's offices that then provided ancestors to the university. Just in terms of scope, we do hold or held about 400 ancestors here on campus and over 40,000 associated funerary objects. Our holdings are very regionally based, and we tend to focus on Central California, and a little bit into Northern California as well, primarily Patwin, Miwok, Nisenan, and Yokit territories. And the remaining human remains are from Oregon and Arizona and Alaska. We do have 3 separate repositories on campus. So the Department of Anthropology Museum is our primary repository on campus, where we have most of our NAGPRA activities. We also do have the Museum of Wildlife and Fish Biology that holds ancestors, and we've been working on repatriating ancestors from that museum as well. And then the Shields Library Special Collections. They hold a basket collection that has been reported under the summary process. So we don't know that anything in the Shields Library actually meets the definitions, but we have initiated consultation with tribes to make that determination. Just in terms of a little bit about our organizational structure. So I came on in 2014, and at that time, NAGPRA was taken out of the Department of Anthropology Museum and placed in the Office of the Provost. And I think that's been significant for a number of reasons. Prior to that time, most of the decision making and recommendations came out of the Department of Anthropology. Now it is the provost at the time, Ralph Hexter, felt it was very important that repatriation be a part of his responsibilities and under his oversight. And I think it has helped, I think for a number of reasons, it's been very helpful to be placed in the provost office. In terms of some of our initial compliance, I think it might've been Michele that made the comment about, well, we reported in 1993 and 1995. Yes, that is true. And that was true for Davis as well. I mean, I think that was the approach prior to 2014 is we've checked that box and we have come into compliance, we've reported, and now it's really up to tribes to make the claim. And what we're trying to achieve is something different now. We are trying to be more proactive about reaching out to tribes and making sure that they know what we have and trying to facilitate a collaborative process to work towards repatriation. So in 1995, the inventories, 90% of those inventories were determined to be culturally unidentifiable. And we know that is incredibly problematic for a number of reasons. We did receive very few claims for those culturally unidentifiable, for those ancestors that were deemed at the time to be culturally unidentifiable. There's very few cases where there was actual consultation that took place making those initial determinations. So the basis for that cultural affiliation is primarily archaeological information and linguistic theory. So what we've been doing since 2014 is really trying to look at the cultural affiliation and revisit those determinations in consultation with tribes. So to date, we've been able to reverse the cultural affiliation from CUI to culturally affiliated for 10 different sites. We have 4 different sites that we're working on right now that we're actively consulting with tribes to change. Any of the sites that we have looked at for cultural affiliation, we have been able to sort of get unstuck from that culturally unidentifiable category and work through the committees and get the appropriate approvals to move forward. So we fully acknowledge that those initial decisions were not adequate for a number of reasons. And then summaries, I did want to briefly mention summaries. So in 1993, we provided summaries. They are very, very broad, and it would be difficult for tribes, I think, in general, to make identifications of cultural items from those initial summaries. So we are happy to work with tribes to either re-provide those summaries and then also provide any supplemental information that's being requested to help get a better understanding of what actually the UC Davis campus holds. In terms of, I did want to mention campus policy. When I got here in 2014, it was clear that there were a number of things that either federal NAGPRA didn't address or were discretionary under federal NAGPRA, or the UC policy didn't address. The majority of concerns I heard from the tribes at the time was either cultural affiliation or the UC Davis, the campus's lack of policies about restricting research access to ancestors and other cultural items. And we thought that was something that was really important to address. So we did try and further restrict access to research for research purposes. In 2017, we promulgated a campus policy. It certainly is not as comprehensive as the current system-wide policy. I know that will be revisited when we do have a campus committee that comes online. Part of their duties is to make a recommendation about whether it's necessary now to have a campus policy or not. I presume, I mean, my personal recommendation would be it's not necessary. If we already have the UC system-wide policy and it's strong, then I think that can stand in place of a campus policy. So I'm hoping that that's the direction that we can go in, and that way focus our energies on the repatriation work. I do want to just share with everyone, I don't have slides, but I do, and I will put this in chat. I'll share my screen briefly. I want just people to know how to get a hold of us and how to access some of the information about UC Davis. So this is our website, and I'll put the address in the chat. But here we do have, when notices get published, we do put them on our website. So of course we share those with any tribes that we've been consulting with, but in case anybody else is interested, that information exists there. We do also have a status update. So this is a list of our NAGPRA inventories and notices. And this, I should be clear that these notices are the Federal Register notices under federal NAGPRA, not necessarily under Cal NAGPRA. And so as we are further integrating that process, we can figure out how to update that as well. But these are the sites that UC Davis holds and that we have ancestors or funerary objects from. And if there's a notice publication date, it means that they have gone through the regulatory process and have a notice of inventory completion or notice of intent to repatriate. And then transfer of control, this is something that, I don't remember who is Courtney or Melodi at one of the listening sessions was saying that would be really nice to know is, have you actually transferred control to tribes? Has there been repatriation? And so that's the current status. We do try and keep this up to date as new notices come online. And so hopefully if there's something on here that you are interested in, hopefully we have already been in touch in some way, but if not, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. There is some information about our consultation process. My phone number here, we do have a request form. It's just to help the process. It's not necessarily a requirement. Feel free to just reach out to me by email or phone. And then we do sort of go through some of we know that flow chart is very extensive. And so we wanted to make a tool that's just a little bit more straightforward about what the steps are in the consultation process. So hopefully that's a little bit of an overview about what's going on at UC Davis, and happy to take questions. I think we're going to go through all the campuses. Is that right? And then take questions?
Yep, we'll go to Tom next and then Wendy.
Sure. Thank you for having me, first of all. I do kind of want to begin by acknowledging, and to put it very bluntly, Berkeley has been terrible on NAGPRA. It's something that, you know, I've been on both sides of the equation now, having worked as a THPO and on NAGPRA for tribes. And I really do want to acknowledge the hard work that tribes, tribal elders, tribal representatives, tribal councils have all done to make, to push UC Berkeley for change. I hope that work is starting to bear fruit. So I want to begin by just talking about some of the kind of logistical and administrative changes that we've made. To begin with, you know, I work at the Vice Chancellor for Research's office. Responsibility for NAGPRA has been moved entirely out of the Hearst. The Council of Curators no longer has oversight over any part of the NAGPRA process. In addition, pretty much we're all new staff. Lauren Kreutz and Carolyn Fernald head the Hearst and the Vice Chancellor's office. Randy Katz is the Chancellor's designee. My formal title is NAGPRA liaison, but I serve as the repatriation coordinator as described in the regs, and I answer to Linda Rugg, who's got at least some background in working with tribes. We do have a committee. It's not yet aligned with the UCOP requirements, but without getting too much into the composition of it, I do think that they have been very pro repatriation. Since I've been on board, I've only been on board since mid-July, so for about 2.5 months. We've already submitted 4 notices to the Federal Register. Another 2 are coming down the pipe. One of them, I should say, is actually a case where we determined that we could not figure out exactly which agency had, whether control was us or a federal agency. And rather than using that as a stalling tactic, we've worked with the agency and we're going to publish a joint notice. So that's hopefully a change that we'll continue to make. A lot of the changes so far that I've been able to, you know, that I've been directed really sort of, and I don't want to brag about it too much because most of it's just adherence to the rules and regs, but I think it's worth just saying that we are going out and doing our best to adhere to the rules and regs. So this includes things like real incorporation of TTK, and even sort of taking that a little bit beyond that, looking at oral history. For example, you know, there is cultural memory that forms part of the oral history of when anthropologists came through the area, and incorporating that knowledge in there as a legitimate line of evidence. The standard of evidence, you know, I think Berkeley got called out in the carpet pretty appropriately for having far too high of a standard. You know, the standard we should be meeting is preponderance of the evidence and not the sort of scientific certainty that had been demanded beforehand. We're also interpreting other laws. For example, we had some discussion about ARPA and confidentiality. I don't want to get too much into it, but you know, realizing that these laws are generally designed to benefit tribes and to help tribes, and interpreting the laws specifically around repatriation as having the aim of furthering repatriation, not to inhibit them. And also just being much more transparent in the process, making sure that, you know, you have access to all of our records, not playing, you know, one of the things that I felt that I had to deal with when I was making my claims was sort of playing this guessing game of what do you have and what do you not have. You know, one of the discoveries I've had specifically related to the claim that I worked on, is that a lot of information just did not get to me when I was working for the tribe. And so hopefully that will start, you know, we'll start to open that up. I'm still kind of figuring it out. There are a lot of, oh, by the way, I should make one plug. You know, I think that a lot of these changes are also sort of happening at a broader level. There's a woman who is working at the law school under an NAHC grant named Nazoon. She's somewhere in here. I'm hoping she'll put her email up there. She's working to expand, working with tribes to expand their own protection of tribal cultural resources. So feel free to reach out to her. I know she's eager to speak to THPOs and to tribes. Some of the problems we've been having, or some of the problems that are ongoing, just to sort of lay it bare, the database is not in the best of shape. It's been pushed through, the data have been pushed through multiple databases. We've got multiple duplicate records. I strongly suspect, although I have no way of proving, that there are missing records. And so we're going to have to deal with that as we move forward. We've got, I haven't yet actually been in to see the collection between COVID and the fires. I kind of had one short tour, but I've really not gone in and taken a look. We also have been dealing with a number of problems we didn't expect. For example, there are, I think it's 17 outstanding notices, which were published mostly in the early 2000s, and no tribe has yet picked up the materials. So we're going to be working pretty aggressively to get those items out and back to the tribes where they belong. We're also looking at sort of partnering. I've been especially dealing a lot with Wendy and Megon on finding bases for places for burial, and taking some responsibility on that end with tribes. Yeah, and so those are the major changes that I've seen. There's a number of things that, things like CUIs. For myself, that's, if it's not culturally identified, we can, for the moment, we can deal with that during consultation. I realize that's not a very good long-term solution, but it's not going to stop us. If there are things that are culturally unidentified, it's not going to stop us from consulting with you. So yeah, those are the major changes. And hopefully, I will just say that when I interviewed, I asked some very hard pointed questions, and I was satisfied with the answers I got. And so far, all the directions I've received have been towards repatriation. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to hear. I think probably astonishing for a lot of folks is the university system allowing Tom as their employee to be candid and to be honest and direct. And I think that in itself is a significant shift. I think from the top, we've heard through the stakeholder meetings that, we've heard an apology, we've heard, I think, a lot of declarations that I haven't seen the university, change course or direction. So I think these are great steps forward. I wouldn't say, we've seen success yet, but these are all of the pieces that I think we all, as tribal communities, came together for all of those stakeholder meetings. I think this is what we said, and I think this is what the university system representatives took away from it, and even through challenges, tried to put it into the policy. So one of the things I wanted to highlight, and maybe give Wendy the opportunity to explain, because she eloquently explained it to me as we were going through the process of the policy, is to maybe talk about the way in which Wendy and I think Megon's experiences sort of were brought into the process. I think once the UC, once Lourdes, I think, saw the opportunity and thankfully grabbed the opportunity to bring Wendy and Megon with their expertise into the policy work. And we see that in the tables, and I think in the consultation section. So Wendy, maybe if you could highlight that in addition to also telling us a little bit about the institution you work for and all the great work you guys have actually done, which I think we've all leveraged now through this policy because of you and Carol and the other folks who worked really hard and pushed the envelope. So go ahead, Wendy.
Thanks, Buffy. I guess I'm the elder NAHC person here. I've been working on NAGPRA for UCLA since 1993 while I was a graduate student as an archaeologist and osteologist, and then became the NAGPRA coordinator in 1997. So having seen the really bad and ugly to the not so bad, now it's bad again. Oh, look, it's bad again. And now it got worse. To now we're hopefully doing really well. So I'm really, really happy that they hired Tom. It makes a significant difference also in having someone who will be transparent because he has fought for tribes on the other side. So I think that automatically gives him a lens for what he's looking for and knowing what tribes want to hear. So there could definitely have been somebody put in that place who would continue, and we've seen them, right? We've seen enough people through the Hearst Museum that have just, native or not, had to either curb what they say or was outright hostile. So I'm really super excited that Tom has taken on this challenge, even though it is very high. So at UCLA, I've been very fortunate to work with Carol Goldberg, as you got to meet earlier. She is a powerhouse force all by itself. And she really helped helped us to be able to go forward and do basically whatever we, within reason, do whatever we wanted. So we have never had a UC policy, and I've always sort of worked with the notion that NAGPRA is sort of the guiding principle, but it's kind of like the beginning, not the end. And consultation was the most important part. And in doing that, our chancellor, with Carol's sort of assistance, set aside an cultural easement land for the Tongva, Tataviam, and Chumash to reinter their ancestors from UCLA. So more than 2,000 individuals got to go home, and over 150,000 objects in 2016. And that year, through the Pimu Catalina Island Archaeology Project, which I do with the TIA Society, so working with the Tongva community, we reinterred more than 300 individuals on Catalina Island, which you see behind me, and then at Cal State Bovungna or Cal State Long Beach. So it's amazing what happens when you can work collaboratively together to sort of push forth an agenda. We only have one person who's not claimed right now, and that is an Ohlone ancestor. So they're perfectly aware, and like so many of the ancestors we're taking care of right now, it is really the tribes not having a place to rebury that has been the biggest stumbling block. So while we were able, the UCLA paid for all of the work to get those ancestors reinterred, with San Manuel and San Ynez stepping forward to shepherd another 10 non-federally recognized tribes. We all worked together with teams of lawyers and everybody else to actually get those ancestors reinterred. So it's amazing when you want to collaborate how much work you can get done. But they probably spent over $1 million just on that, taking care of that work. So that's what I see, kind of the direction that all the campuses are going to have to take. And we were very grateful for that. We're basically, like I said, done with California, but we still have folks from the Southwest and Southern Paiute that don't belong to us, but are under the auspices of many different federal agencies like BIA and the Bureau of Reclamation and the Bureau of Land Management, who have been dragging their feet and getting, one, admitting that these are their collections that they need to take care of for NAGPRA, and two, giving us the authority, if not, to take care of it ourselves. So that's primarily what we're working on right now. And otherwise, what I wanted to sort of mention is that we've been working on other sort of policy issues, which is around privacy. And hopefully you've all gotten a chance to see the amendments to NAGPRA that have been put forward around confidentiality. But with the audit, we realized how much anything that you say to a UC will be turned over to the states, even if it's attorney-client privilege, so that it will be for anybody to request from that audit. So we got concerned about it at UCLA, and the Tribal Legal Clinic with Lauren Van Schilfgaard has been working on a white paper in consultation with several California tribes. And thank you, Michele Fahley. And a number of other folks, so Sam Cohen and many others sort of helped to feedback into what are the issues in California that we should be thinking about, and try to propose at least some, you know, either practices or stopgap. So that white paper will be presented at the National Repatriation Conference, and you'll be able to get a chance to hear about that, and we'll be sending it out to everyone who would like. The other work that I'm really doing is called Carrying Our Ancestors Home with Mishana Goman, who is our campus liaison. So she's our Native American liaison to the chancellor. And that I wanted, if I can share the screen, I think so. I just wanted to put that up there, and I'll put the website. One of the things that we really wanted to be able to share, both head in, head out, was kind of our model, is that tribes have a lot of complexity when dealing with NAGPRA that's never considered in sort of this black and white idea of what repatriation means. And so we sort of started with working with the Tongva, Tataviam, and Chumash, and Laura Miranda, our alum, and she was on our NAGPRA committee to document some of these stories. And this can be used in the classroom. We've been focusing on between 5 and 10 minutes. So people will be able to not just read an article, but actually be able to hear from California Native voices on what repatriation has meant, but also getting them to understand that repatriation didn't begin in 1990, that, you know, several elders talk about fighting those bulldozers in the 1950s and even earlier. It would be great to do one on the go road. But also we're trying to collect what other people have already done. So you'll see we have a resource section for folks to be able to check. We're also working both nationally and internationally. So we work with the Rapa Nui, which is Easter Island Repatriation Program. So you'll get to hear some of their efforts, as well as Te Papa. So that'll be all here, and we'll share that later on. And then we've also been documenting, working with the Tongva and Tataviam on what it means to be a tribe in Los Angeles. And of course, surrounded by the fact that we have the largest urban Native population, indigenous population of anywhere in the United States. So being able to also share not just how the urban natives got to LA and what they have gone through, the Pacific Islanders, as well as when we've got sort of cross currents around things like water and especially canoe technology. So you'll see that kind of stuff in there, with an eye on how do we get better information into the classroom in the most sort of amenable way, like malleable way, there we go, malleable way, so that, but you get to hear people's voices. It's not necessarily logistically possible that everybody have a California Native come into their classroom, although it would be great. But at least if we can give them firsthand stories and their views, your views, then it makes the storytelling much easier for those involved. And was there anything I didn't say? We know we won't have a campus policy. We kind of like our own way of doing things, which is however they get home. And the big thing that we're dealing with is the radiocarbon dating lab issue. So I don't know how many of you have ever thought about the fact that samples are sent to radiocarbon dating labs and they run that sample, but really early on. So UCLA was where radiocarbon dating kind of originated with Libby, and then his students, and then from his student Rainer Berger, you get Irv Taylor, who is at UCR. You get folks that were at UC Davis and UC San Diego. Now those labs are closed. And we're finding that, especially in those early examples, they actually sent in entire skeletons and large sort of whole elements of people. So we've been working really hard to try to get those folks home across the world. Kenya, you name it, we're trying to get those folks home. But that's an issue that now Riverside, Davis, us again through Riverside, and UC San Diego are now grappling with. So there are issues just when you think you're done, and I had really high hopes that it would be done. Yes, exactly, Shasta. It's there's something new that we never really thought about that we're having to grapple with. Was that, Buffy, was there something? Is that cool?
Yeah, the only other thing, Wendy, I think is maybe if you could just highlight in the policy some of the work that you guys did to make sure that certain elements were sort of going to happen, like consultation and you know, I think just a lot of your guys' experience shows up in the policy and then in the accompanying you know, flow charts and all of those pieces.
Well, Megan can certainly talk about this as well. I mean, as you know, there's a difference between being a practitioner and being someone who thinks about it legally or theoretically. That's why we did the COA, you know, website. And so one of the big fights have been, you know, really trying to get people to understand that it takes a long time. It's a lot of work going through all of the collections, and it's not done fast. So when timelines, especially, were one of my biggest concerns, we're like, oh, we're going to get this done in 30 days, and then we're going to respond in 30 days, and then we're going to, it's just like, yeah. You know, with all the best of intentions we had repatriations that took 17 years. So it's not fast. All you can do is fall back to being incredibly collaborative, so that whatever the issue is, whether it's on the museum or with the tribe, that there's really good communication going on and trust that's built. That's what we tried. I think Megan and I both tried to instill that in the policy. Give people you know, respect and give people time. The auditors really didn't like me because I didn't have a lot of paper, because, you know, as you know, Buffy, picking up the phone and calling, going to the CalTHPO-SHPO summit and meeting with everyone on the side and having a drink is the way that work gets done, or at least my favorite work gets done. So does that help?
Yep. Megan, did you want to add anything?
Sure, I'll just exactly what Wendy said, just in terms of some of the flexibility things. I think that, I mean, we did land with a, I don't know, is it 45-page policy? When I was at University of Washington, we really didn't have a policy. And I think part of that is, you know, having the flexibility and the collaborative relationships. But I do think the length of the policy is a reflection of the institutional issues. I know here on this campus, it was really important to have policy codified so that I could get through our institutional barriers. There are still, you know, lingering barriers that we are working through. And I know, you know, I am assuming on Tom's campus, there might still be some as well, but we are continuing to have to progress through those. And having the strong statement that the president made and an apology and a directional message like that is incredibly powerful, I'd say. And then, like Wendy said, so hopefully we don't get, hopefully it didn't go too far in terms of over bureaucratizing, that we still have some flexibility to really work with tribes. One other key issue, just picking up on what Wendy said about the radiocarbon samples, that's been such an issue for many of the UC campuses. And I felt like it was very important to have a piece in there that addresses to, okay, now we're making sure those go home to the right places, but what about how are we making sure that doesn't continue to happen? And so there are strong measures that anything that is incoming, there's really only very little ancestral material that's incoming, and it's with the permission of the tribe. And even then it's with a finite time period, and anything beyond, I believe it's 2 years, needs the approval of the chancellor, so that we are tracking and making sure that anything that is coming onto campus with the permission of the tribe is being returned home in a reasonable timeline. So I think that's really important.
Thank you. Going to the chat, I think Shasta had a question. Let me grab it here.
Yeah, about the SAA, what do you call it, like alert that got sent out by government affairs about being against the UC policy. So Desiree Martinez, who's Tongva, myself, Sim Schneider, and Peter Nelson, that are both from Grayton Rancheria, Patty Garcia from Agua Caliente, and Sarah Gonzalez, who was at Berkeley, and I'm missing, and a few other people, Sonia Adelaide and Aura Merrick. We became known as, we got our own thing, we became the Indigenous Archaeological Collective. And so we started holding the SAA to task, both to rescind that, that letter and to call to task why, two CRM archaeology punks wrote that, and you know, call them out for what the damage was that they were doing. And so it also made the SAA have to think about how those alerts go out and who's been vetting it. Joe Watkins, who's Choctaw, is a great guy. So the fact that it happened under his watch was really disconcerting to us. And now we're working on a decolonizing task force on rescinding and redoing the human remains statement that was done in 1986. That's still on their website and still the way they operate. So we're basically trying to hold them to task, and we meet with the board almost every month with this idea of how do we get greater accountability within the Society for American Archaeology in the kinds of efforts that are being done with Native communities. What kind of accountability?
Okay. I think just to expand off from it too, I think it goes even deeper, I think, across campuses, even whether or not they're associated with SAAs or even SCAs for that matter. I think the question is even more to, you know, if there are professors or faculty who still really hold to, you know, the grievance against NAGPRA or even, you know, NMAI legislation and law that are still out there who, you know, are sort of, I guess now they're more working, they're going to have to work behind the scenes even more rather than being up front and being really blatant, you know, as anti-folks who, you know, don't want to repatriate. I think the question, you know, for you all is, do you hear from them, or is this sort of the final word? I wish it were, but I have to ask the question.
Yeah, so I'll answer that. We did receive like 2 or 3 letters from faculty that copied the SAA template. So we received a lot of those letters from non-UC people, and then we received just a few from faculty. There was one rescission, you know, after this person understood that the letter was based on a bunch of falsehoods and where definitions were there and they didn't look at them, and you know, those concerns. But I want to stress that by and large, the faculty, the academic community has been very supportive of these efforts. And the feedback that we got from the academic senate, the formal letters that came from the academic senate and all of their various committees, and there's like 20 of them, you know, and all of the various committees that commented from each campus, you know, and from each committee, were very supportive of these efforts. So I think that we've turned a huge tide. I'm not saying that every single person in the university is in line with this, but I'm saying that I think we've turned a tide. And I think that there is tremendous support for the repatriation principle, starting from Regent Perez to our new president, President Drake, who's already been briefed on this and already has lined up in support of this new policy, to Provost Brown, who you've all met, and you know, on down the line. So and including the academic senate. So I've mentioned a bunch of administrators, and then there's, you know, the academic senate who stands squarely behind this policy.
Thank you, Lourdes. Appreciate that response, and glad to have that support. I think the only other question that we had sort of thrown out there for the coordinators is maybe just to explain whether or not your campus is affected by the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, just so tribal representatives know sort of where your institutions are right now in terms of access or even processing repatriation claims. Maybe we could start with Tom.
Sure. I just want to kind of quickly go back about some of the faculty in particular, without naming too many names. You know, on our website, we have a full listing of all the members of the committee as it now stands. It is headed by a biological anthropologist, Miranda Arguel. I am really comfortable with her ethics and attitude towards NAGPRA. She's very pro repatriation and has, I think, significantly different ethics about research on osteological remains than has been seen out of UC Berkeley thus far. So, you know, obviously, you know, some individuals are going to act outside of that process, and there's not much we can do there. But that, you know, a lot of the more bad actors don't have at least a formal role within NAHC anymore. So I just want to say that in terms of COVID-19, right now the General Counsel of the university has determined that repatriation is an essential service. Tribes have mostly declined. We've only really had one or two requests, and one changed our mind. The elders didn't want to come, and then the other one had to get canceled because of air quality and not because of COVID.
Thank you.
The collections are use external air, so the air was not safe to breathe.
So those are actual visits, but in terms of like email, phone calls, you guys are open for business and doing what you do.
Yeah, I can leave my contact information in the chat box.
That'd be great, Tom.
Sure.
Thank you. Megan?
Yeah, you bet. So the NAHC staff, the three of us are all working remotely, but we are still able to go onto campus when needed. We aren't doing in-person consultations. We have been limited from doing that, but we have done repatriation. So we had a repatriation last month. The tribe was able to come in and do the preparation work that they needed. We tried to keep it to a minimal number of people so that we could just minimize any potential exposure. And then of course we would reburial itself is outside. So that was fortunate we were able to move that repatriation forward. We also have a reburial that we are hoping to accommodate on our campus in the next month. And so there's a little bit of work that we need to do there, and we're hopeful that we can move forward with that. We have had some Zoom consultations, and it's been, I would say, surprisingly effective. We actually, last time we had a meeting, and the tribe identified, just on paperwork, and the tribe identified some materials they'd like to see. And so we have one staff member that's going to go into the office and show those objects to the tribe during our consultation. So we are open to working with tribes in whatever capacity sort of makes sense, with the limitation that we probably can't do an on-campus visit at this point. We are still publishing notices. We have a number of notices that have made its way through the publication process. So we're still actively working towards repatriation. We're also trying to get our draft inventories to a place that once to reflect some of the consultation that's already happened. And then once we can be in person, we can really finalize those quickly and get them to the committees.
Okay, great. Wendy?
We have been taking turns. So Sedona, who is our archaeology collections manager, and I kind of went back and forth on who was going in, but yeah, we're still, I'm now in Seminole country. So I've been working from Florida, from Tampa, and enjoying life here. Still got water behind me. And there's but Sedona's there, and so we can certainly accommodate people coming in, and yeah, we're doing so much work, it's kind of crazy. We have some joint work that we're doing with Caltrans that is moving forward quite nicely. So thank you to Sarah Allred. I saw she was on here, so she's been helping us get stuff done.
Right. Just want to highlight, I think Shasta put in the chat that the Museum of Us in San Diego, formerly Museum of Man, has committed to decolonizing their entire collection and returning anything and everything to Indigenous communities who want their items returned. Is that a bar that the UCs are willing to clear as well? That might be a Lourdes question.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I think that's, I mean, the direction we're going. It's like our first goal is to repatriate. So yes, that's what the direction we're moving towards. And it's, my concern is really with the timing of it, you know, because and the times that are in CalNAHC and the requirements for that, you know, because it, from what I've heard, you know, I'm not a Wendy or a Megan on the ground, you know, at a campus doing this, but, you know, I've learned a lot from them and from all of you actually, which is why I miss you so much. But I've learned a lot, and I've learned that it also takes a lot of time, and so I am concerned about the timing issue. But the direction that the university is going, first and foremost, is to repatriate.
Thank you, Lourdes. So I think we're going to shift to our Native American Heritage Commission folks. Thank you, Tom, Megan, and Wendy, and Lourdes, of course, for being so attentive and available for not just this, but all of the other NAGPRA UC policy questions that we have just thrown your way. So we certainly appreciate the fact that you all have been very responsive and respectful, I think, through this process. So, you know, similar to what it says in the policy, a lot of that trust building, relationship building, it really does go a long way. So thank you. So we're going to shift to, it's 1:19. I think we're here till 2. And so we're going to shift to our Native American Heritage Commissioners. And I think Michele is going to also chime in. Let's see, where are you at, Michele? Is that correct, Michele? You're available, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, awesome. And then, so Merri and Laura. Laura, do you want to start this off?
Sure. I'm a little concerned that we have 40 minutes because we were going to try to go a little more deeply into some of these crucial pieces of Assembly Bill 275 Ramos. I don't know that we'll be able to do that. So just want to put a pin in it that it might be nice to organize a future, you know, discussion, whether that's done through the THPOs or the NAHC organizes it on the sort of maybe the getting into more of the nuts and bolts of 275 since we just, you know, really touched on them and we've been really focused on the UC policy and all those associated issues, which are hugely important. But as everybody knows, CalNAGPRA is a California law for all of these agencies and museums that meet the definition under the law. And the commission has a very large responsibility that has just been added to again. So we want to make sure, you know, we're being inclusive with these discussions. So just putting a pin in that. And so what I want to do, I guess now, is go through, maybe just do a quick little background statement and then go through, Merri and I have sort of split up the roles of the commission, just generally say what they are in the updated version of the CalNAGPRA, AB 275. And then I also want to go through what we have, the commission had approved in April as the nomination, a nomination process for how the UC repatriation committees, both system and campus, will be filled. So let me just start with a little bit of background before we open up the PowerPoint. And I think Shasta agreed to do run the PowerPoint because I also have a hard time trying to talk and be linear and all that stuff. So that just, and you all probably all know this, but the NAHC participated very actively with the UC and when they were going through the drafts of the policy, iterations of the policy. We submitted, I think it was 3 lengthy comment letters on language. We had a 2-day sit down in Berkeley with the folks at UC, full days where we discussed all of these issues. And then we had a Zoom, which was a full day where we discussed all of these issues. So we put in a considerable amount of time talking about not just the commission's role, but as understanding what tribes have gone through in the state, advocating for workable sort of, you know, what Wendy was touching on. It's a big difference of folks putting pen to paper that either have or haven't gone through a repatriation themselves, And so trying to bring that practical aspect of it being usable and workable on the ground for tribes into this as well. So just want to, and we're going to be continuing, and we've spent the time because we're going to be continuing to collaborate, because now that 275 is in effect, we have this joint responsibility with UC, with the other museums and agencies, and with the tribes to have oversight of California NAGPRA. Now, we've been talking about that a lot here today, but remember, there's still the federal law, and the UC is still moving forward with the federal law, and the policy covers the federal law. So although we are, the updates to CalNAGPRA just got signed, we're internally, the commission has, we just hired a new in-house lawyer. We have the Attorney General still working with us on the repatriation issues, but we're internally going through everything right now to have a review of language, how the commission is going to be implementing that, practically carrying it out. We have a position for a NAGPRA coordinator that hasn't been filled yet. We have staff recommending a new NAGPRA page on the website, you know, all of these things that we internally have to get ramped up to do. And we're doing that right now. So there's a lot here that I'm probably not going to have great answers for you all, except we're working on it. But I want to tell you what we have done and how we're seeing things as going forward. So with that, we'll start the PowerPoint, if that's possible. And we can go to the first slide after this one. So the first thing I just wanted to touch on was the definition of California Indian tribes. And that, as you know, in the old CalNAGPRA iteration, the 2001 version became outdated because the CFR section that it cited to was repealed. So it basically left a situation where there were only a handful of tribes that were still on this list, or that were eligible, that weren't federally recognized. So it was just a problem of the law being outdated. Assemblyman Ramos had a first iteration of the bill, and then went through a process to edit that, did talk to the Heritage Commission about that in regard of ideas, and then they selected to go ahead and edit that section of the bill. It's 8012 C12 of the Health and Safety Code to the definition now reads that it's basically federally recognized tribes and tribes that are on the contact list maintained by the NAHC for purposes of consultation pursuant to the Cal Government Code 65352.3. And that is the definition of tribes in the SB 18 planning law, which is also the AB 52 list. So basically what it's doing is taking this existing list that the Heritage Commission has maintained of California Native American tribes that are both federally recognized and non-federally recognized. So it's taking into account the unique situation of California, having a broad inclusive definition that expands the number of tribes that are entitled to now participate in the CalNAGPRA. So that's the first piece. And then, we need to have, so per the statute, we're supposed to have this contact list completed by January 1. I think we can do that before then. As I understand, Christina Snyder was thinking that we could have that done very soon, like within the coming weeks. I haven't checked in with her recently about this, but I'm sure that that will be coming out soon. And then when that's completed, we notify the state agencies and the museums and the tribes in writing that it's complete. And this list is for repatriation purposes. So that's the definition, the new definition for CalNAHC. And then the next slide, if you wouldn't mind forwarding. I'm going to start going through what is the role of the NAHC in the CalNAHC. And there are a lot of junctures where the NAHC comes in. Wow. Merri and I are, or Commissioner Lopez-Keifer, we promised each other we'd call each other commissioner so we can make sure to keep everything professional, above board here. And, you know, it's so hard because we wear so many hats, and we're also friends. And so, but we're, the role of the commission, first I wanted to point out that there are a lot of junctures of points in the repatriation process under CalNAHC that call for consultation. There are so many points in time where there are opportunities for consultation, 3 or 4 different times, and maybe more. And the commission has a role in that sort of juncture. So this first one, the commission assistance to agencies and museums concerning cultural affiliation. So one of the things that is required by the law is an updating of inventories and summaries. And that is a consultation point where the agencies and museums are to do this, complete these updates in consultation with tribes. And the commission's role can assist them with identifying tribes that are reasonably believed to be cultural affiliated with the items at issue. And this is it sounds simple, but it's also a very important piece in terms of the unaffiliated. And it's a part of the solution to help move unaffiliated off that list into an identified piece or identified tribe to move towards repatriation. And those tribes, who are these tribes? They are the tribes whose state Aboriginal areas include the area from which the remains or associated items were removed. So that is a guidepost for the commission in identifying these consulting tribes on the contact list. There's also another point here, a consultation point, when the preliminary inventories, so I don't want to go through a whole step-by-step because that'll take so long, but there's a point where the preliminary inventories and summaries are completed, and the commission then publishes notices of those completion of the inventory that they have been completed on their website. And this is another so they have that duty. And then this is another point in time when consultation is available and required, I believe. And then the commission can assist in identifying tribes that maybe weren't consulted with, or understanding who might be missing from that conversation, assisting the museums and agencies. Let's see. So then once it's posted, there's a 30-day review period for those inventories and summaries. And during that period, the tribes may concur or disagree with the information contained in them. The commission's role here is on completion of the 30-day review period. the commission will note the preliminary inventory or summary and any tribal concurrence, disagreement, or non-response. So it's keeping in line with the oversight role. It's really taking what was originally established when repatriation, so 2 years ago, I think it's 2 years now, a bill was put through to bring all of the CalNAHC per repatriation, because it used to be under what was called a Repatriation Oversight Committee, and they moved it under the commission. So that was a big deal. It basically gave the commission a new role in terms of the body of the board members. And so this is in keeping in line with that oversight responsibility to sort of track things, make sure they're happening, make sure they're happening in a way that's fair, make sure they're happening in a way where everybody's getting what they need, and it keeps moving. And then the commission's role here, the next step is that the commission, at the point when the responses, the tribal responses, concurrence, disagreement, non-response, it has been completed, so there's a 30-day review, then the commission has a responsibility of changing the status of a preliminary inventory to final. That's once all the responding tribes concur with the information. There's a note on that a final inventory may be moved back to a preliminary status at the request if inaccuracies are noticed later. But the point is that the commission oversees that, that tribes have concurred with how this has been put together. So really important there. Let's see, I think I've sort of just gone through all of that. So on to the next slide. And I think Merri was gonna take, we're gonna take some of this, or how do you wanna share it, Merri? We're at 1:35.
Oh no.
Time-wise. Did I lose you, Merri, or Commissioner
No,
Lopez-Keifer?
Yeah, I forgot to unmute. I was saying, yeah, I'll take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Everybody take a stretch. All right, thank you, Chairwoman Miranda, for going through. And just another disclaimer, although we're very excited that AB 275 has passed, we do acknowledge that regulations will need to be promulgated. And in the history and tradition of the commission, we will listen to tribes first and get all your feedback as to what those regulations should look like within the parameters of the statute. So today I'm actually going to talk about 3 sections dealing specifically with these areas and the NAHC's roles and responsibilities. And it's section 8014, 8015, and 8016. So for all those following at home, that's where I'm talking about. So 8014, what I want to talk about is the claims process. Most important to note here is that if a lineal descendant or a California Indian tribe wishes to make a claim for repatriation, they do so by filing a claim not only with the NAHC, but also to the agency or museum that's holding the collection or you believe is holding the collection. And lineal descendants is described in 8014 subsection A. For that, you're looking at proof of ancestry and California Indian tribe as to the requirements to be able to file a claim. You're looking at subsection B of 8014. And there you're looking for either the shared group identity or the Aboriginal territory. But again, the most important thing is that you're filing the claim with both the NAHC and the agency or museum that has the inventory. The next step for the claims process is actually 8015. Section 8015, and that's when you're getting into the NHAC's responsibility as far as what do we do with the information once we receive the claim. And subsection A tells us that the NHAC must then, upon receipt of the written claim, that we publish it on our website, but then we also have to forward a copy of the claim to the agency or museum that has the collection or you believe to have the collection. So that's, again, as Chairwoman Miranda was saying, a step in the process to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Going into repatriation agreements, this is a great section of CalNAGPRA because again, this is in section 8015, subsection B, where it doesn't prohibit repatriation agreements. So basically, it allows a tribe or a lineal descendant to enter into a cooperative agreement with the agency or the museum on repatriation, how it's going to work out, what you're going to do, that's where you have a meeting of the minds and you come to agreement and you don't need to go into any other dispute resolution process. This is supported by the statute. The only requirements here and where the NHAC has a role is that the agreement must be provided to the NHAC. And the reason why, and this is a really important step, is that once we do have it, the NHAC has the power to enforce the agreement according to the statute. And again, that's in section 8015, subsection B. That's a very powerful thing. The NHAC has never had that type of authority before. So, so that will probably definitely be in our regulations going into that. So the next section I want to talk about is section 8016. And that deals with the disputes and mediation. It's important to note here that there are several layers to handle disputes. The first section I want to bring your attention to is subsection C. And that relates to when a museum or agency objects to a claim being made under section 8014, so that they too have a line to bring their dispute to the commission for their disagreement. Section D goes into the fact that at any time there's a dispute between any of the parties, whether it be between tribes, tribe between the agency or the agency museum with the tribe, that dispute can be raised with the commission. Important things to note under subsection D, all the paperwork comes to the NHAC. So all your documents, your claims, your responses, everything comes to the NHAC, and the NHAC then provides that to all the parties. When you do make a claim to a dispute claim with the NHAC does make sure that all notice is given to the parties. So everyone who's involved is being noticed. So I kind of flipped that on that chart. The next part is once a claim has been done and the papers have been exchanged, the documents have been exchanged by the commission, the parties do have 30 days to try to come to a resolution on their own again, with the hope that they're seeing the paperwork and they're seeing what each other are arguing, that they maybe can be able to come to this resolution. If they are not, then the commission does arrange for mediation. And again, the paperwork and the distribution of paperwork is all monitored by the commission and or the mediator. If it does go to mediation, all the parties are entitled to receive a written decision of that mediation within 7 days of the mediation process. If the parties are still in dispute, then you can go then to the commission itself for the commission to resolve the situation. If the commission hearing the dispute acts as the final administrative remedy. If the parties again are not satisfied, at that point, a claim or a claim could be made or filed with the Superior Court of California, where you ask for an independent judgment on the record to review the NAHC's decision. And then that completes that process. And again, these are all found in Section 8016. The most important thing to note for the disputes and mediation section is that the Commission must adopt mediation procedures no later than June 30th, 2021. So that is something that Chairwoman Miranda and myself and the rest of the commissioners will be taking, will have to take action on because that is required by the statute. So I think that covers my sections. I hope I didn't go too fast. And I will now kick it back to the chairwoman.
Thank you. I'm sure there's probably many questions about this. So hopefully we'll get a chance to get to some of those. And if not, this will be a continuing discussion. You have mine and Commissioner Lopez-Keifer's commitment to keep having these discussions with agencies and tribes. Okay, the next slide, I just want to go through, we have, just letting you all know, we have currently three subcommittees on repatriation issues with the Commission. One of them is the CalNAHC regulations, which Commissioner Lopez-Keifer mentioned. The Commission will be promulgating regulations. You might be familiar, some of you, with the fact that we are in the midst of, we're in the pre-process of regulations on the most likely descendant statutory sections. The way we did that was to actually have hearings or listening sessions and working sessions before we even put pen to paper. And I'm hoping we can do the same thing here. Then start drafting more consultation, and then finally into the official OEM California rulemaking process that we will have to go through. And that is Commissioner Pagling and Commissioner McKay that are currently the subcommittee for that topic. Commissioner Lopez-Keifer and I are the subcommittee on the UC policy. And for the nominations, which I'm going to go to next, for the UC nominations, that's Commissioner McKay and myself. So can I go?
I think there's, I don't know why I didn't catch it before. There's also one other subcommittee that will be playing a role, and that's the SB 18 contact list subcommittee. And that's Commissioner Adelberry and myself.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Oh, and then the last slide before we go into the nominations is just our contact info, how to get a hold of us, general email, which I'm sure you all have, you know how to find us, but just wanted to put that in there and make that available. So can we, Shasta, would you mind going to that one pager Word document or?
Yeah, stand by. Sorry, I heard a motorcycle in the background. I thought maybe Merri hopped on a motorcycle and just sped away. She's like, I'm done here.
I'm not that lucky.
Let me see.
To have a motorcycle. And I didn't realize my camera was off that whole time. So sorry.
No, I saw you. All right, here's our, all right, are you guys seeing the page?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay.
Okay, it's can you, is there a way to, I don't know if it's, it looks small on my screen. Small? Yeah, it looks small, maybe like at,
there you go.
But okay, cool.
Bigger.
We can scroll down as we go
Yeah.
through.
Yeah, is that
Okay.
better?
Yeah.
Okay.
My eyes appreciate it, Chairwoman.
So this was adopted at the April meeting of the Heritage Commission. And it's basically a one-pager outline of the nominating process. So one of the roles that the NAHC has with the UC, both the system-wide committees and the campus committees, the new component that Carol Goldberg was speaking about that has been a change here on the composition of the committees is that the commission, instead of the UC filling these committees, the commission is responsible for compiling the nominations. So we're basically going to be soliciting nominations for not only the spots that will come from Indian country, tribal representatives, but also the UC spots as well. So what is going to be happening in the near future, I can't give you a date. I know originally we were really hoping that we could get something going this month, was that the commission we have forms, a form for a system-wide and a form for a campus committee that we'll be sending out on this one pager, it says to our NAHC contact list, but I think it's going to be expanded. So this one pager was approved with the ability for the subcommittee, which is Commissioner McKay and I, to amend it. So I think we're going to be expanding that that notification list beyond the NAHC contact list. And if you all have ideas of lists, that would be great, because I'm thinking, obviously Federal Register list, contact lists, but then also other lists that are inclusive of tribes and individuals that work in this arena, like the THPO list too, that might be interested in serving. And then we also are going to be looking to coordinate with Lourdes and Tim over at the UC on how we're going to solicit nominations through the UC institution and how we do that. And hopefully we can coordinate in that way. But just to note that one of the reasons that the commission is here playing this role is because the commission is the state oversight committee. We have purview on these types of subject matter issues, and it ensures a more fair and equitable seating of actual committee members on these various committees, that we will be doing the nomination selection process. And that's in the statute. It doesn't get into the sort of details of that, but it clearly says, I'm just gonna pull my section, that, I'm sorry, I should have been ready with the section, that the regents or regents designee shall appoint members to the committee, and this is for both the system-wide and the campus, upon nomination by the commission. So we have the sole role here to nominate, and we'll be taking those nominations. So in the nomination packets, in on the forms actually, which I didn't share because they're not completed yet, there are the requirements that are the statutory requirements. So what happens is you will fill out this form and provide verification of the statutory requirements, and then the commission's going to receive these nomination packets back from folks and verify that these things are met and verify that they are appropriate to be to sit on this, sit on either of these committees. I'm sorry for my pausing, but there was something else that I wanted to mention. Oh, in the criteria. And Michele may want to comment on this too, because she had a role, a key role in putting together the criteria here. But there's a really important piece here that is for the UC representatives, that not only are there the straight sort of requirements of the graduate degree and the focus being in California, graduate degrees in archaeology, anthropology, Native American studies, ethnic studies, law, sociology, environmental studies, or history with a focus in California. That's one requirement. Two is having a minimum of 5 years experience in that field. And then another key piece is preference shall be given to members who have demonstrated through professional experience the ability to work in collaboration with Native American tribes successfully on issues related to repatriation or museum collection management. So again, we're talking about, folks that have done this successfully, have good relationships with tribes, and working relationships that they can demonstrate that the preference will be given to them. So the commission will be taking those and putting the preferred folks, flagging those in some way for the nomination process. That when we give the packets to the UC, they will know who the preferred folks are there. And obviously we'll only be giving them folks that meet the requirements. So I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, Michele.
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. When we were building the structure of the Gloria Bill, aside from what are the actual identified obstacles, in the process, we really spent a lot of time talking about who are the folks that should be making these decisions, from a deliberative and collaborative process perspective. And so a lot of the folks that I was speaking with on the non-legal aspects of this, one of our curator, who is also a member of the tribe and an archaeologist, and also interned at the Phoebe Hearst and saw firsthand some of the issues going on inside the museum. And we also have on staff at Pechanga an archivist who is a PhD with a specialization in J.P. Harrington's ethnographic notes and all of those materials. So working with both of those individuals as well as other folks in our team at Pechanga, really identifying who, from their academic background and then experience-wise, who is it that we should be, considering for placement on these committees. As I mentioned at the beginning, really thinking about those academic disciplines where repatriation isn't in conflict with the tenets of their academia. And so, looking at folks that have had work with Native communities through, anthropology or archaeology or law, all those other areas that we wrote into there. We wanted to make sure it wasn't people that might have a conflict with wanting to keep human remains. And then also adding in not just, on paper, we want to see that you actually are able to work with tribes collaboratively. And so, there's lots of different ways. We talked about this in the work group sessions, that there are different avenues in which universities work with tribes. So, looking at, faculty that have, done projects that involve tribes, it doesn't have to be necessarily repatriation per se, but, showing that sensitivity, showing that willingness, and understanding and those things that can help move repatriation forward. So really put a lot of thought and conversation into that. It's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. I think if we could, we'd probably tweak that language a little bit today to maybe make it a little bit broader, but still, making sure that folks that might have a bias aren't sitting. And that's, again, to tie that into the NAHC's role. As Laura mentioned, they are the clearinghouse. They are the oversight agency in California that deals with the extraordinarily sensitive conversations around human remains and their treatment and respect, and how that should go, right? That the NAHC is pretty much the sole agency here in California. So we wanted to make sure that not only did we have an independent, neutral, experienced entity helping with those decisions in this policy, but also, you know, to give assistance to the UC. To be honest, you know, I think Commissioner, and the commissioners, as well as Chairwoman Miranda, saw during their process with the UC is that this is new, right? As I mentioned at the beginning of my first comments, that this is new for the UC to have to undertake these kinds of activities and consultation efforts. It's a new area of law. So, you know, really I felt, and so did the team, that having the NAHC both as that oversight, but also as a supportive role as the UC works through these really, really massive structural changes. We wanted to make sure that we all have the resources we need to make this as effective and as successful as possible. So those are just some of the comments I wanted to add in terms of our thought process at the very iteration of this. And I'm happy to entertain any other questions.
Thanks, Michele.
Of course.
I'm just gonna stop there because we probably have questions. It's 2 o'clock, and would rather take questions than keep talking.
Actually, I was looking at the questions that we had formulated in advance, and I think actually that last piece really answered and clarified a lot of the questions that were out there that we really, I think, heard from tribal officials, tribal representatives.
About the nominations?
Yeah, how the nomination process was going to happen, and the selection process. I will also say thank goodness for AB 275, because it really truly, I think, clarified things that were difficult to understand in the Gloria bill. So great work, folks who worked on that.
Buffy, we do have one question, and I know we've gone over a little over time, but Monty Bengocha raised his hand, so I'm going to send him an unmute request. So Monty, I've unmuted or sent you a request to unmute yourself, so you can do that now if you'd like to go ahead and speak. Well, he has. Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
You know, I must have accidentally hit a button, but I still don't have any questions. This is pretty new to me, and I'm just listening. Thank you for acknowledging, I guess, my fake hand up or whatever.
No, you're keeping us on our toes, Monty, so I appreciate that. All right, well, in that case then, Buffy, you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Thank you guys so much. I know this is a really deep discussion, and definitely more needs to be said. I think you have the THPO support to do, let's call it the AB 275 advanced instruction Zoom call that needs to happen. I think several THPOs put in the chat they would totally support that. Melody's shaking her head. Obviously, Great and Rancheria would support that. We could host it. Shasta's always willing. So I think it's just more or less name the date, the time, the location, which will be probably Zoom, unfortunately. But yeah, we're happy to do that, and I think it's much needed and necessary. Melody, did you want to say something too?
I did. Just two quick things. I wanted to really thank Lourdes for the latest version of the policy. We sat down, you know, and we had phone calls and just talked through a lot of the things we were hoping to see in it. I think given the comments that we heard today that for AB 275, we don't have a great idea and there are a lot of concerns. So I know for us, what we're planning on doing is sending another comment letter about incorporating AB 275 into the interim policy. And then I plan on giving Lourdes a call to talk to her to discuss like what's feasible and what's not. And I just want to encourage other people to do that too, because that's a nice way to get that back and forth without having it, you know, within the time constraints that we have. Sorry to, and I know Lourdes and Tim and the UCOP folks have been really great about responding to that. So that might be a nice way to get a lot of AB 275 into the interim policy when it's finalized, or kind of my 2 cents. And the other thing that in AB 275 that I realized that we may have missed, that was a really big point that I loved, is for summaries, does say that potentially any Native American object is a cultural item. So that really opens it up, because I know that there's a lot of things that haven't made it into summaries before. So another Easter egg in AB 275.
And the point there, Mel, is that any collection, you don't have to have a human remain present in the collection to then trigger NAGPRA. The agencies and museums should be proactively going through their anthropological and archaeological collections, not only those that have an identified human remain.
Yes.
Yep, great points. I feel like we should get to organizing the next step in the next training on this, because I think, you know, I mean, the whole purpose of it is, of course, to repatriate ancestors, but also to repatriate through the other categories that are available to tribes: cultural patrimony, sacred objects. We oftentimes, because we've not done a great job, we meaning the collective UC folks, you know, I will say there's a lot of work to do, especially with tribal ancestors, but there's also traditional ceremonies that have not been whole because those objects have not been repatriated either. So there's still a lot of work to do, but this is exciting. You know, I will forever say, you know, Laura, Miranda, Michele, Fahley, Courtney, Coyle, Merri, all of you are truly the icons of cultural preservation. Laura, you've been here for so long, and I so appreciate all of your work. I remember, you know, and Wendy Teeter, I'm not going to say you're old, Wendy, but dang, girl. You've been here longer than I have, Wendy Teeter. No, you all are very amazing, amazing ladies and doing great work. And definitely from the tribe that I represent, we do wholeheartedly, sincerely appreciate your guys' efforts and your tribes that you represent. So thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah. Right back at you, Buffy.
Yeah, thank you,
Yes.
Buffy, you too.
Thank you, everyone. This has been amazing. And obviously, even with 3 hours, it's not enough time for this. So yeah, we'll get together on planning that all day, every day panel on this. So let's take a break now and stick around. 2:30, we're going to be talking about tribal beneficial uses for water. And a lot of tribes don't have those. So you really want to come back and hear about that.
Yep.
All right. See you
Thanks.
soon. Bye.